أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين. Verse 34 of Surah Nisa. الرجال قوامون على النساء بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض وَبِمَا أَنْفَقُوا مِنْ أَمْوَالِهِمْ. Men are the managers of women because of the advantage Allah has granted some of them over others, and by virtue of their spending out of their wealth. فَالصَّالِحَاتُ قَانِتَاتٌ حَافِظَاتٌ لِلْغَيْبِ بِمَا حَفِظَ اللَّهُ. So righteous women are obedient, caretaking in the absence of their husbands, of what Allah has enjoined to be guarded. وَاللَّاتِي تَخَافُونَ نُشُوزَهُنَّ فَعِظُوهُنَّ وَاهْجُرُوهُنَّ فِي الْمَضَاجِعِ وَاضْرِبُوهُنَّ فَإِنْ أَطَعْنَكُمْ فَلَا تَبْغُوا عَلَيْهِنَّ سَبِيلًا إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ عَلِيًّا كَبِيرًا. As for those whose misconduct you fear, first advise them, and if ineffective, keep away from them in the bed. And as the last resort, beat them. Then if they obey you, do not seek any course of action against them. Indeed, Allah is all exalted, all great. Okay, this is another verse which very clearly defines the roles of wives and husbands in the family. About the word قوام, الرجال قوامون على النساء, there's a great disagreement among the translators how to translate this term قوام. Now I just had a look at different translations in English, and we see this differences of understanding or maybe taste with regards to translation of qawwam, which is somehow related to the background of the translator as well. So here Ali Quli Qara'i has translated it as men are managers of women. Now Shakir says men are the maintainers of women. Sarwar, Muhammad Sarwar, says men are the protectors of women. Yusuf Ali translated as men are the protectors and maintainers of women, has actually combined both terms in the translation. Irving, men are the ones who should support women. And Pictol, men are in charge of women. And Arbery, men are the managers of the affairs of women. Now, as you see, these different translations indicate different background and understanding of the translators about the verse and how they have taken some aspect of the term qawwam, the one which fits better with their mindset and understanding. Now, what does qawwam mean? Qawwam and qayyim and qayyam have the same meaning. They are all hyperbole of qa'im. Now, also we have a stronger hyperbole, which is qayyum. Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyul qayyum. Qayyum means the one who holds, protects, preserves, maintains, and sustains everything. This is the sifa, how Allah is described. Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyul qayyum. Of course, qawwam or qayyam are not as strongly as qayyum is. However, they have almost the same meaning. So when we say qawwam, It means someone who protects, sustains, maintains. Qawwam. And however, what is somehow forgotten in all these translations is the suffix ala, qawwamuna ala, which shows a sort of authority as well. It's not just managing or maintaining or supporting, it is also having an authority because of the suffix ala, ar-rijalu qawwamuna ala nisa. Now, why? Of course, the verse mentions later on the reason for this. However, it is quite reasonable to think that in a family which we have a few members, someone must be the one who say the final, who has this final say. We cannot just leave it as obscure, saying that, okay, everyone have their own opinions, and eventually they either settle with each other, or they go to court, or they fight with each other. No. One person in the family, either man or woman, either wife or husband, has to be the leader of this small community of the family. We have in many narrations that even if two people are traveling with each other, one of them must be the imam. Even two people exist on the earth, one of them must be with the imam. Of course, that's about imama and guidance and other things, but it also tells us about how the differences, the oppositions are settled, that someone must have the final say. And the verse is saying, and this is the injunction of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that the one who should have the final say in the family, of course, after all consultations, after all negotiations, after accepting the reasonable views and everything else, if they cannot come to a unified conclusion, which is unanimously accepted in the family, then of course it is the husband who has the final say. Now, the verse tells us that this is for two reasons. One reason is that they are بِمَا فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ بَعْضَهُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ, and the other is because وَبِمَا أَنْفَقُوا مِنْ أَمْوَالِهِمْ, which I will explain later on. However, it's important to bear in mind that the verse is outlining family roles here, mutual duties between the couples. This is what the verse is trying to outline at the beginning. And it says that, of course, each have their own roles. However, because men are supporting financially, it means they have to support financially the family for a reason, which I'll mention later on. And because of the differences in creation of men and women. Why? Because, for example, women should give birth, and during the time of gestation and carrying the baby and then giving birth, and afterwards they need to put their care for the baby. They cannot work outside, and for this reason, of course, this is a general law. I mean, there may be always exceptions. However, as a general rule, this is what happens. And therefore, men who have more consistency and stability in their situation and then can work continuously, they are the ones who must provide for the family, even if the wife is able to do it. But as a general rule, this is what as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I am actually enjoining you, that men must provide. And for this reason, and for other reasons, and that's the creational differences, they have to be the one who has the authority in the family. Of course, this is only a role. It doesn't mean that men are better than women, or women are worse than men. No. فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ بَعْضَهُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ. Some merits have given to some of them, and other merits have given to some other of them. Some merits are given to men, some merits are given to women. But if we want to assign roles in the family, we assign the role of leadership in the family to husband. One may say, in the modern society, in the modern context, we don't need leadership in family. Everything should be settled by mutual agreement. Of course, what if mutual agreement doesn't come? Then someone must have the final say. Unless if we say, okay, divorce must be so prevalent that anyone, as soon as they disagree, they can just separate from each other, which is not good. I mean, just imagine what happens to children, what happens to the innumerable number of children who are brought up in single parent family and all these things. For this reason, I, as your creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, assign this role to the husband. But you should not think that men are better than women. In verse 228 of Surah Baqarah, what we read, وَلَهُنَّ مِثْلُ الَّذِي عَلَيْهِنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Wives have rights similar to their obligations upon them. However, وَلِلرِّجَالَ عَلَيْهِنَّ دَرَجَةٌ. Wives have rights similar to obligations upon them in accordance with honorable norms, and men have a degree above them. This degree doesn't mean creational degree, that in creation men are better than women. It's something as a legislation. I give this legislation that men should have this authority in the family. So qawwam here means they have to support, maintain, sustain, and give all sorts of needs of women, material and spiritual, and they also have the authority in the family. This is the meaning of الرجال قوامون على النساء. And when we read the views of contemporary commentators, that they all say this does not mean that men should act as a dictator in the family. However, there should be someone who have the final say in the family after, of course, all compromises, all negotiations, all discussions, and everything which a family needs to hold itself calmly, peacefully, and quietly. Then, of course, if they cannot come to an agreement, men have that authority. And the reason for this is, two reasons are mentioned here for this superiority in authority, which of course contains responsibility as well. It is an authority which is given because of responsibility. First is what Allah has actually legislated. بِمَا فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ بَعْضَهُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ. Now, بِمَا فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ بَعْضَهُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ could be understood in two different ways. One is that this is related to legislation. That's because of the advantage Allah has granted the husbands over wives in legislation. بِمَا فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ بَعْضَهُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ. So in this case, بَعْضَهُمْ, the first ba'dahum means the husbands, and the second ba'dahum means the wives. Allah has ordained this. This advantage should go to men, which is of course accompanied by responsibility. This is one way of understanding it. The other way is that no, this فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ بَعْضَهُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ. The two ba'd in the sentence, some of them, does not refer to wives and husbands. Rather, it refers to men and women. Allah has given some advantages to men and some advantages to women. And when we it doesn't actually mean that one have more advantages than others. As I discussed before in our last session, that I mean, when Allah says that the heaven is under the feet of mothers, this is a great advantage given to women. And of course, women are in charge of reproduction, giving life, and all these things. This is a great advantage. And men are given other advantages. So some advantages are given to women, some advantages to men. And when we want to put all these together, at the end of the day, we come to the conclusion that because of what was said about women having other responsibilities in the family of giving birth, rearing and caring for the children and all these things, then men must be the caretakers, managers, and having authority in the family. So it doesn't mean ba'dahum ala ba'd, doesn't mean that Allah has given men advantage over women in creation. Even if we say ba'dahum ala ba'd refers to men over women, husbands over wives, it means in legislation and not in creation. And if we say that ba'dahum ala ba'd has been mentioned because both of them, both men and women, have differences in their creation. Some have advantages over others, so you cannot say in a definitive way that men are superior to women. Some commentators have said that why ba'dahum ala ba'd? Those who believe that the first ba'd refers to men and the second ba'd refers to women, they say that, well, of course, by experience we can see that not all men have superiority over all women. Some have superiority, and we see some women who in all aspects can in a sense go ahead of men, be superior to men. But as a general rule, this is legislated, because generally this is not the case. But of course, this idea is based on the creational creational advantage in the verse, which we said this is not the case. At any rate, we can say, I mean, by all the discussions mentioned, that the authority and management asserted for men in the verse is logical. It should be understood in the light of the differences in reproductive involvements of the two sexes. While men can maintain a steady and consistent level of activity and in making livelihood, women's ability is significantly diminished by, of course, giving birth, by looking after children, by nursing the children, wet nursing the children. So that is why it is logical to give the responsibility of maintenance to men, while of course it brings an authority with itself as well. Now, some say this is a form of patriarchy. This form of patriarchy is a simple and efficient solution that fits very well in the context of the revelation of the verse. But nowadays it doesn't apply anymore, because it's not the case that only men are breadwinners, that only men are working. And now the role of women, the emancipation of women from many bonds requires that this law should not be applicable anymore, because we are not living in a patriarchal society anymore. However, even though the aspect of spending out of their wealth may not apply anymore, and men and women work together to bring maintenance, what provision for the family. The first aspect still remains, and that is بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض. In legislation, Allah has given this legislation, and if the norms have changed in terms of family, still one of the couples must have the final say if we want a sort of peaceful family. So although بما أنفقوا من أموالهم, by the virtue of spending out of their money, may not apply anymore. May, of course, generally it does, overall in the whole world, but may not apply in certain cases. But Allah has given this role, فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ بَعْضَهُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ, in legislation. And this supports the idea that these family roles, which are mentioned in the Quran, should not be tampered with. As soon as a change comes to the society, we just say, okay, these roles should change now as well, and either women should become should have the authority in the family, or both of them together. Well, we know two people cannot have the final authority together. You cannot have two presidents for a community. You cannot have two heads for the family. And if we say that, okay, everything must be settled by agreement, then we come to the situation where most couples do not agree, and it leads to separation and divorce. So these family roles belong to a much bigger whole, which is composed of many members that are meaningful together as a consistent system. Now, بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض, as I said, it doesn't mean that, first of all, this tafdil has been left ambiguous, even if we say it's in creation. Allah doesn't say which advantage. So it's better to take it as a legislative advantage. فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ بَعْضَهُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ. Now, Sadiq al-Tehrani, the contemporary commentator, has compared this superiority of men over women. If we say it is a superiority, of course, authority doesn't always mean superiority, but he has compared it that it's like the superiority of marja over the muqalladeen, the scholar who is followed by those who follow him in religious precepts. Oh, he has an authority, and authority is because of the knowledge. They have to follow him. However, you can find among those who follow him people who may be much more virtuous, pious, with myriads of different types of expertise, scientists, physicians, doctors, and all these things, who have even more knowledge in those fields than the marja may have in his own field. But it is an authority which is rational, reasonable, because he is the expert in that field. And as we follow the scientists in their fields, because they are experts, we follow the marja in his own field, because he's an expert. However, that authority doesn't mean that he is superior to others in virtue of human merits. And that's very clear. So this is what Sadiq al-Tehrani mentions. I don't want to comment on that, but we know that, of course, in terms of taqwa, God-awareness, we may have people who are quite live incognito, but maybe very virtuous, maybe from awliya Allah. But in terms of fiqh, they have to follow marja. Okay, after mentioning this, الرجال قوامون على النساء, men are maintainers or the authority, have the authority over women. I don't know how to translate this. Men are the maintainers and managers of women with an authority, maybe, because of the term ala qawwamuna ala nisa. Because of the advantage Allah has granted some of them over others, and by virtue of their spending out of their wealth. Which is, of course, this is an injunction. They have to do it. Not that if we say they don't spend, then they lose the authority. No, they have to spend and they have to have this authority. This is what I have assigned them. Now, after these two, of course, reasons for saying men have authority, or men are supporters, maintainers, protectors, whatever, the verse classifies the wives into two different categories. فَالصَّالِحَاتُ قَانِتَاتٌ. First, the righteous women, who are obedient, caretaking in the absence of their husbands by what Allah has preserved. فَالصَّالِحَاتُ قَانِتَاتٌ حَافِظَاتٌ لِلْغَيْبِ بِمَا حَفِظَ اللَّهُ. And the second type of wives are those whose misconduct you fear. And of course, the treatment of these two types of wives, two categories, by the authority, by the one who has authority in the family, must be very different. I mean, naturally it would be very different. Those women who comply with the norms that Allah has set for the family, and those who do not comply, who behave with misconduct in the family. So the first group of wives, فَالصَّالِحَاتُ قَانِتَاتٌ حَافِظَاتٌ لِلْغَيْبِ بِمَا حَفِظَ اللَّهُ. Righteous women are obedient, caretaking in the absence of their husband, of what Allah has enjoined them to guard. Okay, we have two descriptions here for Salihat, the righteous women. First, they are Qanitat. Second, they are Hafidatun lil Ghayb bima hafid Allah. Well, Qanitat could be towards Allah or towards their husband. Now, Qanat, Qunut, which is the root word of Qanat, means obedience with consistency and persistence, with humiliation and submission. This is the meaning of Qanat. And this is something that Allah has required from both men and women. حافظوا على الصلوات والصلاة الوسطى وقوموا لله قانتين. Stand before our God as a qanat person. And the awliya, the prophets, the God-weary servants of Allah has been described as having been qanats towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إن إبراهيم كان أمة قانتا لله حنيفا. Ibrahim was an ummah in himself who was qanit. So he was obedient to Allah, worshipping with humility and with persistence continuously. And also Maryam, Salamullah alayha, has been described in the Quran as Ya Maryam uqnuti. It has been commanded by Allah, Ya Maryam uqnuti li rabbiki wasjudi warka'i ma'ar raki'in. Be qanit to your Lord. And in fact, Allah says everything in the heavens and the earth is qanit lillah, obedient. in Surah Baqarah, بَلْ لَهُ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ كُلٌّ لَهُ قَانِتُونَ. So everything in heavens and earth belongs to him, and they're all qanit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, we have to see whether this as-salihatu qanitatun, salihat are qanitat, whether this refers to the relation of wives to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or to their husbands. So this is what we have to leave for our next session, inshallah, when we continue discussing this very important verse in Surah An-Nisa. رَبَّنَا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين.